The Communist Party of Vietnam, the 14th National Congress, opens on January the 19th this year, with roughly 1,600 delegates convening to formalize decision already brokered in the preceding months. Previously, that we've been talking about the pillars of the Vietnamese Communist Party. Now, this year, there seemed to be more dramatic and drastic change. And what does that say about the party in Vietnam? And how about this economic and the political agenda? And keep in mind that we're living in an uncertain world. And not only just about what Donald Trump is going to do to the world, but also about this unification. In 2026, how do we know the countries, particularly Vietnam in Southeast Asia, is able to overcome the political difficulties and ready to work with the partners? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who's the Dr. Hong Nguyen. Dr. Hai is the Assistant Professor of Politics and International Relations at the College of Arts and Science at Advent University. He's also the Adjunct Associate Professor for the Center for International Development, Social Entrepreneurship and Leadership in the Australia of Sunshine Coast in Australia. Well, Dr. Hai, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will. My pleasure.
Well, again, Dr. Hai, as I mentioned before, last year you and I we discussed extensively regarding the Communist Party of Vietnam. Now, this year there seemed to be a groundbreaking news regarding the structure of the party, and I want to read something to you. It looks like, again, based on the report, there seemed to be a unification for the four pillars of the party: is General Secretary, the President, Prime Minister, and the National Assembly Chair. So, Dr. Hai, from your perspective, for the Communist Party in Vietnam this year, what can we expect regarding the four pillars, and how significant it is if the four pillars were to be unified? Your thoughts?
Well, I think first of all, I need to clarify the pillars. Now, according to regulations adopted by the party last year, the key position structures of the Communist Party of Vietnam are five. It's the Prime Minister, the President of the National Assembly, and the standing member of the Politburo and Secretariat. So five key pillars. And what people now say the party is going to the pillars into four pillars. I mean, they want to combine the party secretary position and the president position into one. That means one person's now is holding the party secretary generals and the president. So if the party secretary general serve concurrently the president, then of course there will be only the party secretary and president in the one hand of one person, and the prime minister, president of the National Assembly, and the standing members of the Politburo and Secretariat. So I think this is the four pillar, or more precisely, the issues of the party secretary general concurrently serving the president is an issue that has been discussed within the party of the Communist Party of Vietnam for decades now. And of course, the issues became more pressing recently, more particularly from 2008, when the late Party Secretary General Nguyễn Phú Trọng, back then, holding concurrently for more than 1 year. And then, of course, in 2024, when Secretary General Nguyễn Phú Trọng passed away, the president at that time, Tô Lâm, then, of course, briefly served the president for 3 months. And, of course, the function of the president is representing the country in international affairs. So, but as we have seen in the past, since 2018 so far, the party secretary general in many cases also serve as the head of the state, representing the country in international. The issues of the party secretary general serving concurrently the president becomes more pressing, more urgent, and it is an issue that really, you know, drew the attractions of the public. So the question of party secretary general, acting as the head of the that case, of course, in Vietnam, the party is the only party in power, the ruling party. That means the head of the party is also the head of the state and the government. So then the question is, why don't he also, serve as the president? The issue put on the table for discussion now when we see the world is changing and it require the power to be implemented, right? And the decision one is adopted is implemented. And in order for Vietnam, where there is only one party in power, it is more important when they want to make sure that the decision and the power is consistent and the decision will be implemented swiftly. And of course, when we the the policy and the goal that it will becomes a developing country with high incomes by 2030, and also becomes a developed country 2045, when the country marked the 100 years of the founding of the Republic of Vietnam, which is now the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. So in order for the country to achieve the goal, it requires decision made and implemented consistently. And that's why the questions again of the party secretary general serving concurrently the president is more relevant, and that's why there's a discussion, and I think it has been achieved. I'm not sure, of course, 100%, but according to different resources, that the party will accept and adopt that kind of proposals. And of course, it will happen, and we will see after the general election in March. That means the elections of the National Assembly. Then we will have the government new concurrently as the president.
Dr. Hai, again, when we look at the current Communist Party of Vietnam, then next question, it's about, is it about one-man show or it's about collective leadership? Because again, we know the political party in Vietnam, it's very much different from the political party in other countries in Southeast Asia or even compared with the US. Again, before taping the show, you and I, we had a brief discussion regarding what's happening to the world, especially related to the West. And we're going to get to that in a second. But look at what's happening in America, that again, Donald Trump is the president, and every 4 years, there's a presidential election. It looks like Donald Trump is the only one who sits behind the driver's seat, or who sits in the driver's seat for the political changes. But meanwhile, we know that this is not a one-man show for Donald Trump. There has to be some collectivism or collective ideas in order to make miracles, so to speak. So when we talk about the Communist Party in Vietnam, is it about one-man show or it's about collective leadership? Because we know that when we talk about the communism or the deep-rooted communism philosophy, One man show doesn't really work all the time, and it requires and demands a lot more complication or even say collective ideas within the party. So, what do you say to that right now when we look at the Communist Party in Vietnam? Can we depend on one person, or we have to bring this collective ideas or collective wisdom in order to make better results? Your thoughts?
Well, I think when we talk about, or when we, question about whether it is a one-man show uh, leadership, I think apart from what we see at the moment, what we see as the, institutional format, then we also have also to look at the political culture and also the culture of the country. That is more important, right? Now, I think in the United States it's different. Trump is now, of course, doing that and can do that, because the Republican is, taking majority, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. He won't be able to do so if the Democrats take the majority in the Congress. So I think that's different, right? And of course, in the United States, now, what will happen, in 2029 when they have a new election? Trump is not there anymore, right? And of course, Trump will be able, and Democrat might return to power. Then that's another story. Now, people very often, compare and talk about that when they look at China or even in Singapore, right? When the Lee Kuan Yew, Malaysia, when Mahathir Mohamad was in power. So, of course, people, talk about one man show. But again, as I said, of course, Vietnam is sliding to the model that we just, talked a moment ago, when the party secretary general holding or concurrently serving the president. And and then people, swiftly and quickly um, um, branded as a man showed, a one man showed model. I don't think to Vietnam. Even I already I would always say China is different from Vietnam, or more precisely, even though the ruling party is the Communist Party, but Chinese Communist Party is different from Vietnam Communist Party. Um, so we won't be able to compare. And if we look at the power history in the Communist Party of China, or more broadly in the history of China, which is different from the history of Vietnam, and also the power building history within the Communist Party of Vietnam. So I think any comparison is irrelevant. I would say, but and Vietnam, of course, it will be very difficult for one man show in the current situation, and still, Vietnam doesn't have that kind of history, and its kind of culture, and I think Vietnamese people supports more collective leadership, and um, it has been consistently implemented, more particularly since đổi mới, launched 4 decades ago. And the always say, the party leaders always say that, well, we need to control, we need to manage the powers, because, you know, power is always the root of corruption. And, the party always trying to put in place mechanism in order to control the power. So, in short, for me, it doesn't matter whether it's one person, holding party secretary general position, concurrently serving the president. It doesn't matter. It's the I think institution matters, right? Whether we have the mechanism in place in order to control and to manage the power, that is more important. So I think that's what Vietnam and the Communist Party of Vietnam is trying to achieve and to implement. And of course, it takes a process. It's going to be able to, of course, put in place straight away, the another political party or some kind of check and balance mechanism or systems. It won't be able to do so straight away or overnight, of course. But that is what Vietnam is, trying to achieve and to implement.
Dr. Hai, I'm very glad that you mentioned the word power. Again, you're the expert in the political science spectrum. That when we think about power, we tend to explain or would tend to be translated into the strong power or the weak power. Now, we know that when one thing happens in one country can directly influence to the rest of the world. Let me bring another character into our conversation, even though the person is not from Vietnam. It's called Jordan Bardella. He's the leader of France's far-right party National Rally. When it comes to the role of the US, recently he made this comment, and again, related to what we're talking about when we talk about the power imbalance. And I quote, "The America is presenting us with a choice. Accept dependency disguised as partnership or act as sovereign power capable of defending our interests. When a US president threatened the European territory while using trade pressure, it's not dialogue, it's coercion, and our credibility is at stake." End quote. Dr. Hai, from your perspective, when we look at the role of China, when we look at what's happening in the US and, of course, the country's shifts in Europe, do you believe that the current Communist Party of Vietnam is able to take a stand for what's right, especially when we look at the powers are growing or the powers are shifting overseas? So in other words, we're tapping into not only domestic concerns, but also international, because we know that internet is a good thing. Internet opened up the whole world to everyone. So when the younger generations or even the party members, when they look at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in America, they're saying maybe it's time for us to strengthen our internal dialogues, or maybe it's time for us to strengthen our internal structure in order to take a stand or defend what's right instead of being bullied by the strong power. What do you say to that?
Well, now domestic or internal power structures or implementation is different from external or international power structures, of course. And now frankly, within a country, right, a political power in ruling can do whatever they can do, to be honest. Now look at North Korea, right? So there's a one man shows, and also everything is of course controlled by the party and Kim family. And right, they controls powers and so what I mean is that domestic politics is different from international politics, because within the jurisdiction of the country, of course, one party in power, they can do whatever, whether it's a democratic society or there's a one party society. Uh, Democratic societies like the United States, as you also mentioned, and I when one party take the majority in the Congress, like Trump is doing now, Republicans doing now, right? So they control everything. They manages everything. There's only, power is more democratic when, of course, um, in the United States, when the other party or the Democrat Party take the majority in the Congress. Then, what I mean is that, you know, democratic society or one party society, when there's only one party in power, and take the majorities and they controls the power. But when it comes to international power, it's different because um, one country cannot control it, right?
Mm.
And the party, of course, cannot control it. Now, of course, Trump is threatening the independence of other country. When we
Mm.
talk about the Greenlands, and of course, what he's doing is in international uh, um, um, arena, and he said he would impose tariff on European countries, which oppose his intentions to grab Greenland. Then it's a kind of course, it's a kind of coercive power. Now, if we look also at this, what happening, in the South, there's a lot of coercive powers, and again, the international powers or the powers in the international relations, I think is different. And of course, Vietnam, as a developing country, Vietnam, geopolitical position in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific, is always at the forefront of competitions. Now, if you look stories of the 20th century, and of course, in the early decades of the 21st century, Vietnam has been at the forefront of the war and also competition of major powers now. Not given the fact that, of course, Vietnam also involved in disputes over sovereignty in the South
Mm.
China Sea.
Mm.
So for Vietnam, the history teach uh, um, the country that in order for it to have the powers to in international affairs, it need to strengthen the power within the country.
Mm.
And of course, I mean, the power within the countries here is the synergy, the strength of the country politically, and of course, in terms of defense and security. So I think Vietnam, trying to consolidate its power by all means, internally and also externally, in order to, stand on the same bar in the world, and of course, in order to protect its sovereignty. Yeah, that is more important.
Dr. Hai, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Again, we have to talk about the foreign policy in 2026. Again, it might seem a bit too early, even though we're just in the first month of this year. But again, looking at what's happening in America, especially sitting US President Donald Trump's bold, I dare to use the word challenging rhetoric at the Davos recently, and regarding the role of US and also regarding the desire to take over Greenland. Again, as you mentioned before, that he threatens with the European allies with the tariffs if they don't agree with US when we look at Greenland. And also, we look at the midterm election this year in the US. It's rather crucial. Donald Trump surely has a busy schedule, and also the plate, it's always full. So, Dr. Hai, from your perspective, we know that when it comes to foreign policy in Vietnam, Vietnam has been always proactively engaging with the partners, especially from this economic standpoint. So, what role do you perceive, or what role do you see for Vietnam when we look at? I don't want to use the word chaos, but let's use the word uncertainty on the other side of the planet. Because again, as we mentioned before, by the time 2029, Donald Trump is going to be done, but the political party is not going to be finished. So, what can we expect? And how do you know that Vietnam is ready to deal with Donald Trump 2.0? Your final thoughts?
That's a very interesting questions, Will. Well, I of course I can't tell people you know what American foreign policy look like after. In fact, the United States doesn't have a foreign policy. I have to acknowledge this is something many people, confuse. Uh, but now for Vietnam, I think Vietnam foreign policies will change. I mean, in terms of opening the door to the outside world. Of course, Vietnam will keep doing that. More particularly when Vietnam aim to achieve centenary development goals I mentioned before. And of course, the utmost aim is the goal of being a developed country by 2045,
Hmm.
when the country mark the 100 years of its independence from foreign, invaders. So I think that is more important. And in order for Vietnam to must, the word must, not has to, keep going as it is now. Even Vietnam need to, deepen and widen its international network. So regardless of who will be in power in the United States, who will be the president in the United States, it doesn't matter, for Vietnam. But Vietnam keep going, and of course, Vietnam's, good relationship with the United States and other countries, of course. But the difference, now the big difference now, when we look back, the emphasis on foreign Party of Vietnam in the past decade and from 2026 is that foreign policy or international relations now is on the same bar with defense and security. Is that mean for Vietnam, international relations as important as defense and security? Now, in the past, Vietnam's or the Communist Party emphasized, only two wings, economic development and defense security, right? So it means, economic developments go hand in hand with defense and security. But now, of course, it realized that in order for Vietnam to achieve the goal to develop, of course, Vietnam cannot um, be detached from the rest of the world. Now, when we say so, that means we talk about international relations, we talk about foreign policy, put, attach importance to international relations or, international or foreign investment, then of course it's all about foreign policy. It's all about international integration, and that's
Hmm.
why it must be, equally considered important as defense and security. And that is the difference, the big difference now. So I think, of course, Vietnam has, done quite well. Vietnam has expanded its diplomatic networks. It has relationship with 194, 195 countries around the world now. But and of course, it has upgraded relationships to comprehensive strategic or strategic partnership with 42 countries now. So I think that is important for Vietnam to keep going as as it is now the relations in terms of opening the door to the outside world. So I think, of course, Vietnam has attached importance to foreign policy, but it emphasized again that the roles of international relations is now as important as defense and security. So, and more importantly, when Vietnam relationship with other country is another way of protecting your country. So foreign policy and international relations is not just with other international partners, but it also means defending the country's sovereignty. It also means that it's about foreign investment. So, and I think Vietnam will not change the course.
Of course, I mean, again, there's no denying that Vietnam will continue to play a rather significant role when we look at the international stage or the international relationship. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, such an honor to speak to Dr. Hong Nguyen. Again, Dr. Hai is assistant professor of Politics and International Relations at the College of Arts and Science at Vinh University. And I strongly encourage everyone go online to connect with Dr. Hai in order to understand the bigger scope of the politics around the world. Again, Dr. Hai, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you back on the show as we continue to discover and explore those interesting matters. So thank you so much for doing this.